So, once upon a time, I heard rumors about this anime that was very interesting. And because I was in the mood, I decided to check the anime. It's on Netflix, by the way. And it turns out the rumors were true. It was interesting, actually. So much so that I decided to go straight to the source, aka I read the whole manga. Beastars is a manga that ran from 2016 to 2020 and it has a total of 22 volumes. The story in general follows this grey wolf called Legoshi and his transition from being a teen still in school to entering adulthood. And in this transition, he understands a little bit better many complex aspects about the world he lives in. This is a universe where animals have reached a point of evolution in which they all live together. They are basically like a human civilization, but not everything is perfect. And we see the good and the bad aspects. Now, like I said, when I saw the anime, I thought it was very nice. Then when I started reading the manga, I really got into it. And I really thought quite soon that, ooh, I think I want to talk about this. However, I was so into it that I had to stop at a certain point because I was getting way too heated. I gave myself some time and then I came back to it and I finished it. Now, some of my thoughts have changed, I'm not gonna lie. But overall, I still wanted to talk about it because I, overall, had a great experience reading it. Not only because it was entertaining, but also because it had very interesting points. So before I get into all of these aspects, highly recommend, really. Is it perfect? No, it is not. But it was interesting and fun. So if you want to, highly recommend. And before we enter the whole discussion, spoilers ahead. Now, when I was younger, there was this very famous Colombian author called Rafael Pombo. He had a lot of stories that are so-called fables. I grew up with those and I really used to love them. A fable is a very interesting aspect of literature because the idea behind the fable is that you use animals that behave and act and speak like humans, and usually they go through a journey, and at the end of this journey there's usually something that is to be learned. There is a moral that you gain from that story. One of the things that we have also found in the last century or so is how important these stories can be for kids. The basic idea behind the importance of these stories and the usage of animals to talk about certain issues is that it allows the kid for a safe place to deal with certain fears or doubts that they might have. During the developmental years, kids might start having certain questions or realize certain things. However, they lack the understanding and sometimes the words to express these fears. The great usage of a fable, of a story in general, is to use certain animals and certain characters that are realistic enough, yet you combine them with fantastic aspects like the fact that animals talk or the usage of magic. And you deal with these issues. That's why usually fables have a resolution. By having a resolution in the story, in this safe place, the kid feels, internalizing of course, that the doubts can be solved. And you have things like Disney and also other companies that, well, show how those stories really just get into you. Those stories are found in various places of the world, but the way in which we just kind of grew up with them and we just like them so much that even after we grow up, we go back to them. It really shows, I think, that we enjoy them. We like that safe space and that we can get a lot from it. What's interesting about the companies that have made these movies is that not only have they made the famous fables and the famous stories that we all know and love, but they have also done something fascinating, which is adapting human stories way more complex than those that a kid has and talk to them in a fable way. So they convert this into the animal kingdom and they use magic or they use kind of, this fantasy land. But this is where it gets tricky because it is not an easy job to do, especially if you're not really aware of what are you doing. One example of this is The Lion King, both the first one and the second one, who are sort of based on Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet. Now, these are two stories that were made thinking about humans and issues and the drama that humans go through. Very complex things. And also, with certain endings that are not very Disney-like. But Disney was able to adapt it in a way in which it kind of worked. And especially with the second one, Seamless Pride, and the whole idea of Romeo and Juliet, I think it's fascinating because it's a story that it's kind of worldwide. We just recognize it. There's this word in literature, in particular in theatre, called canovaccio. A canovaccio, directly translated, it's a piece of clothing, a fabric. But in the terms of theatre, it is used to indicate a plot, a basic plot that goes from point A to point B, and it also has certain characters. Characters that are usually already defined, their personalities are already recognizable. What the theatre, both street theatre and high theatre, kind of do is have a canovaccio and they just play with it, like literally. So you reach from point A, from point B, using these characters, but the way you do it, it's on you. In fact, when you adapt something, the messaging itself can change. Can change both in terms of what happens in the play. In the case of The Lion King and Simba's Pride, well, the ending, even though it's based on Romeo and Juliet, doesn't really end like that. You can have a variation on the messages, depending on the company or the director point of view. So, you know, a character that in the original was maybe a little bit more dark and, you know, had this kind of evil vibe, you can kind of convert that and you can make him a bit more nicer. We see this change of adaptation so much that I don't think we really realize it, but I think it's a very interesting. I mean, the amount of times that the Romeo and Juliet as a canovaccio, aka as the most basic idea of that plot, has been adapted into anything, basically, it's kind of amazing. Now, in the case of Romeo and Juliet, the point of these adaptations and the reason why they work, it's also depending on what are you trying to say about it. In the case of Simba's Pride, before I read Romeo and Juliet, I really enjoyed the movie and I understood the kind of main point of it. It was a fable, yes, that it had animals that talked, kind of had personalities like humans. They went through this very basic storyline, and I understood that, hey, don't hold into grudges because sometimes they don't really make sense. A resolution sometimes can be made if we just talk. Don't judge people just because of the background, especially if you don't really understand the background. You know, there's so many things that you can get and that you do get. However, this is when it gets tricky. You get those as a viewer if the people behind it understand not only the story, but understand what they want to say, and they understand the universe of the fable in which they tell that story. And not all of them are wins. In 2016, there was a movie released about this animal, a bunny, who wanted to be a cub, and we see her kind of becoming a cub. In this universe in which animals have reached a level of evolution in which they all live together, almost like humans. Yes, I'm talking about Zootopia. And I have to say, before we go on, I actually enjoyed the movie. For entertainment value, and if I shut down my brain, I can have a good time watching that movie. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to use it as a not so great example of trying to turn a fable when you don't really understand too much how to do a fable, especially if you base it on human issues. And I thought about three main points that are connected to each other, but there are three main points that I think explain why one works while the other, not really. The first one is, if you don't understand an issue in the context from when it is originated, when you translate it, well, you're gonna get lost in translation. Two, the human universe, the real universe we have, has a lot of complexities. If you want to go into another universe, you need to think of that universe also in the complexities. So it's not a direct mirror. Even if you want to say something about humans, you need to think about it in the context of the universe you are using that story. And three, sometimes just don't translate certain things. And if you want to translate certain things, be more honest about it. In the sense that if you need to get dark, go dark. Because otherwise, well, it's not going to be understood, so you're not actually translated. So it's better maybe not to translate it. And you can see how these 3 points are basically lost in Zootopia, even on the first half an hour of the movie. As a quick rundown of the movie, we have Judy, who's a bunny. She wants to be a cub ever since she was very little, but her parents are a bit worried about her, like there's never been a bunny cub. And there's a kid in her kind of class that bullies her and is like, you're a weak bunny, you will never be able to be a cub. And then we see a montage of her going to the academy, and it is hard, it is difficult, but she pushes through. She works hard and she studies a lot, and she graduates with honors. And because of this, she's given a job in the main city. And on her first day of the job, she arrives and people are quite nice. She even fist bumps someone that she's never met and they're like, okay, it's fine, I guess. The chief arrives and gives everyone what they have to do for the day, and it gives her parking duty. And Judy is like, I don't agree. She goes to him and is like, well, I was top of my class in the academy. There are high profile cases going on. I could work on those. And the chief basically says, I don't care. Do parking duty. And Judy says, well, I'm not just a token bunny. And this is a moment in which, if we have to pause the movie right here, well, you realize how this statement of hers doesn't make any sense. Up to this point, we have seen this universe. We have seen how this world has adapted to all kinds of animals. How the system tries to accomplish everything for everyone in one way or the other. We never see, not only in these first minutes, but even for the rest of the movie, we never see the system itself blocking Judy from becoming a cop. The movie is trying to kind of tell us there's discrimination, but we never see that happening. Not only that, they use the word tokenism in her statement of I'm not just a token bunny, without really understanding tokenism. Tokenism in humans is a very real issue connected with minorities and the discrimination that they face in various aspects of society. It is a very complex issue, and if you don't understand it, the moment you try to convert it into the animal kingdom, it's not gonna add up. Not only that, the movie itself doesn't in any way showcases how that is actually a problem. So in no way it's adding up. It doesn't make sense. The only moment sort of that we could almost reach tokenism is when she's asked to be the face of the department. This happens though after she solved the case. She talked to the press, she was like in front of the press, people knew she solved that case, and she was asked for that, so it makes sense. We don't see her struggling getting into the academy, we see her getting honors and given that job because of her merit. That's what the movie kind of implies, that she's good at it, so she got the job. So there's no tokenism there. If, for example, she hadn't done any of that, but the police department would have still said, no, let's put her through, like lie about the fact that you solved the case, then that might be tokenism. And even then, it's kind of tricky because, again, the universe itself doesn't give us much to work on that. So as you can see, from point number one, if you don't understand one thing in one context, yeah, you're not going to be able to translate it. And adding the second point, if you don't understand that universe itself and how it is made, then no issue is going to be able to be logical. We don't see this universe having any real issues. We are presented right off the bat with the idea that predators and prey. But that issue is kind of solved right away, they kind of found peace and everyone lives together. The criminality aspect comes from other things like robbery or selling things when you shouldn't. Nothing connected with predator and prey anymore. Yes, some issues are based on basically mentality. There's nothing actually showed that says that a group of animals from any species is actually blocked from accessing things that everyone else has. The moment in which the predator and prey issue comes back is not only in the fact that Judy, yes, doesn't trust the fox at first, but then she learns to trust them, but also in the fact that some of the animals that are being missing and that are becoming wild are predators. However, the predation aspect, it's because of some sort of chemical that is making them act that way. An issue that is then solved once they find out that there is a chemical. So the issue itself kind of gets solved quite easily. It doesn't impact society as much as they kind of want you to believe. They have a lot of scenes of these things happening, like, oh, getting away from a predator or saying racist things. But again, it doesn't add up if you don't really understand how that universe works. And if you are not giving us in that universe the context for these conflicts to actually have value. So, in the moment that the mother kind of pushes the kid farther from the predator, it doesn't make sense because for all of the rest of the movie, you're telling me that besides, unless you're kind of attacked with this chemical, that tiger is not going to do anything. There's no actual issue. Yeah, sure, misinformation is kind of a big deal, but also there, it's never presented in a way that makes it like it's critical. And this is where the point 3 comes into place, and we also introduce Beastars. Because some issues, if you're not going to go all the way and actually deal with them, just don't do it. But if you're going to go there, then you need to sometimes get dark and even gory. Now I know what you're thinking, well, it's a Disney movie, they're not gonna get there, but that's exactly the point of point 3. Then don't do it. Either focus on another subject, try to think of another message that you want to send, and try to work on it in a different way. But these issues that you're trying to present, without getting into the dark aspects of it, show that you don't understand the issue, you don't understand the universe you're using, so overall, nah. And here's where a lot of my praise for Beastars are right. Again, this is not a perfect manga, this is not a perfect story, there are certain aspects that I'm not very fond of. However, for the sake of, comparison and talking about this, I do have to say that I'm quite happy with the way Beastars present these issues. On the first volume of the manga, you are right away introduced with how this universe works. You are shown, even then for the rest of the story, certain moments, some big ones and some small ones, that showcase that this universe has been thought out. You have things like smaller animals walking closer to the walls. You even have, sometimes the author itself kind of explains some of these things. Like there's a uniform for all of the animals at the school, but then you can have modifications according to your tale, for example. In the school, kids live with other animals in the dormitory, and according to the species of animal they are, basically there are certain things that some have to do and some others have to do other things. The architecture as well as the social interactions are closely connected to the fact that we are talking about different species of animals living together. And the big aspect of predators versus prey, it's showcased in a way that is not actually solved. Animals have evolved to a point in which they can live together, in which the world is very modern. However, it's not perfect and it hasn't been just solved. Many predators or animals that eat meat still have a strong, instinct to eat meat. In fact, we're introduced right away with the fact that someone, an animal that is considered prey, has been eaten. You get dark right away. And again, if you want to talk about all of these issues, you kind of have to. Which doesn't mean you have to get kind of brutal and really, really like disgusting. It is never like that, but it gets dark enough that you go, oh, this is serious. So the complexities of a system, of a society, are connected to so many things like the history, various changes, like the environment itself. All of these things add up to both the good things and the bad things in a society. And when you read something that shows that there is at least an understanding of that universe, then it gets really interesting. Like when I was reading this, there were so moments in which I had to stop because I was like, oh, like I was thinking about it. It was like fascinating, I would have never thought about it. And it's a nice thing. I really appreciate that. And more important, when dealing with certain subjects that could be translated kind of from humans to the animal kingdom, we get really into depth. One discussion in particular that I really enjoyed was the intra-species relationships. So, Legoshi has a crush on a bunny. Not only that, his grandfather is actually a Komodo dragon. His grandfather fell in love with a wolf. And we have been shown that in this universe, interspecies relationship, it's not great. And one thing that is made very clear is that even though animals have evolved up to this point. And even though they kind of behave very anthropomorphic, species tend to remain with the same species. So when an animal from one group likes or wants to be with another, it's looked down upon. It's not seen as normal. But it's not just that it's not normal, we also are given a few moments of understanding of why. Because in certain cases you have a predator that wants to be with the prey, but the real issue, and this is the one that we are presented with Legoshi wanting to be with Haru, who's a bunny, is it his predatory instinct that wants to eat Haru, or is it his actual emotions and is it romance? So he wants to eat Haru. In this story, you're gonna have that very complex thing. However, you're going to be given also certain examples of it going well and going not so well. In the case of Legoshi's grandfather, his grandfather who's a Komodo dragon, it's a predator who falls in love with another predator. And they like each other. They have a very nice relationship. And you also see a case in which a predator was hanging out with the prey. They were trying to, get on with it, and ended up quite badly. And during the second half of the story, you're introduced to the extra evil guy. Basically, during the first arc, there's usually one evil guy and then it steps up. We have the second evil guy, who is an interspecies kid, who has a very tragic story, and it's basically a very not great animal. And we're introduced with this character to the possible results of these relationships, both in the physical aspect, but also in the biological and maybe psychological one. We go back to the usual nature versus nurture. And this is when we can kind of, translate these issues to the human universe. But what I really like about reading this is that whenever I was trying to go there, after a certain point, I needed to move on. Basically, I can talk about these issues of interspecies relationships, nature versus nurture, in the universe of Beastars. But the moment in which I want to fully mirror it with the human universe, I cannot. Which is okay. It is okay, because even though we could kind of try and see these interspecies relationships that are looked down upon as a mirror of humans, and certain relationships that are looked down upon, in reality it doesn't make sense, because the human world is different than the animal kingdom. The issues with our society is that we look down on many things and other people, other humans. These issues that we have are incredibly complex, because also we are all part of the same species. In the animal kingdom, well, you cannot really add that. In fact, a Komodo dragon and a wolf in a universe are never going to have a baby. It's just not going to work. So the question is not, well, is it possible? No, that's not the point. Because even then, in that universe, we're told that even if it is possible, there's very low chances of that baby actually growing up. And there's a whole aspect of the instinct. Basically, because we're still talking about animals that have a wild side, this is a complexity that it's part of that universe. So you cannot really put it into a human universe. So that discussion kind of stops there, and we can go on in this universe, and that's great, that's lovely. But if we want to talk about issues in our home universe and humans, then you need to then step it up. Which I think is a very nice example of how media can actually give you hints to start a conversation. Beastars have this aspect of kind of two people that like each other but shouldn't be together, or the universe kind of feels like they don't want the kids to be together, but they really like each other, and they have to kind of fight for the love. All this in an animal kingdom, in a universe that is incredibly complex, and also dealing with certain issues that we can deal with in the safe place of this universe, but we as adults can step up and then talk about in the human world. So Beastars is kind of a great fable for adults. Another quick example of this is the fact that in this universe of Beastars we talk about addiction. Because carnivores still have these wild instincts and there is a black market of meat, some animals have eaten meat and some have gone crazy, in the sense that these instincts go way overboard and then they need more and more and more. And we see extreme cases of how far can this addiction get. And we also are presented with basically a doctor that tries to help them. And we see again various cases, how far they can get, but also the complexities behind that addiction. They're all connected to the fact that we're talking about predators. If we want to translate that into humans, we do have certain aspects, like the fact that it is something that completely changes someone's life. It is not about it's a bad person because it has an addiction. Absolutely not. There are certain things that happen in an environment that might lead to that. But it is not about a person being automatically a bad person because of that. We see a lot of dark aspects of addiction that we can kind of see in humans. However, the addiction in this universe is connected with the issue of the universe in which animals are still kind of animals. So their instinct is a big part of their addiction. In humans, we cannot really say that. There are certain theories about addictive personalities and that the fact that some people might be more inclined. However, that is a subject that needs to take into account way more things than just that. So this story can be a great step up. If we want to talk about this in the real life universe, we should, but talking about it in human terms. And in this fable that is Beastars, what I think is great is that, again, while you're reading it, those moments in which you stop and go like, let's think about it. You have the same amount of part of you that goes, okay, but this is just about the story, let's keep on with the story. And then you can, be like, let's keep on thinking about it, but actually convert it fully. What can I say? I really like a story that sometimes makes me think. Now, if you think this is going to be all praise, no. I do have certain things that I want to point out that, I'm not too fond of. Out of the bat, I felt that especially during the second half, we were introduced to a lot of interesting things, but the ending was sort of rushed. As I said, there are 22 volumes, but I thought we could have had a few more just so we could close some things a little bit better. I mean, overall, I'm still happy, but there are certain things that I would have liked to see a bit more. I also would have liked to see a few more nice interspecies couples. Like, we had interesting examples, but I don't know, I again, maybe it's connected with the fact that there are things that were open and kind of never went anywhere. Also, what happened to the snake? The police snake in the school. That was one of my favorite characters and kind of disappeared. The art style at first can be a bit rough, but it gets better. Some queer aspects were weirdly placed, and I don't know, sometimes I was really confused about exactly where we were going with. There are certain characters, in particular Haru, that kind of faded. Again, I would have liked to see a bit more moments in general for various characters, and because I felt that it was a bit too rushed, never saw them. I would also like to point out that I don't know the author. I have no idea what her intentions were, so all of this is based on my own brain. I haven't even checked a lot of discussions on the internet because I wanted to do this based on just what I got, just me, myself, and I. Now, back to things that I liked about it. I did say that the art style is a bit rough at the start. However, I really enjoy seeing all of the ways in which the animals kind of look. And I in particular really like the fact that when we were introduced to some characters, you are given the full type of animal. Yes, some characters were a bit forgotten about, however, even the small ones, like small characters, I really felt there was three-dimensionality to it. In the sense that I could kind of create my own thing in my mind with what happens behind the scenes. The anteater and jaguar moment, it was so cute, I basically cried. Nice memes in the community and really nice fan art. Highly recommend. I really hope we all agree on having a crush on Legoshi, but also have a crush on his grandfather. I really enjoyed the cool fight scenes. I think there was a bit more action than I thought it would be at first. And they were quite nice, actually. Now, this might be controversial because I do know from the few things that I know that Rui, or whatever it's the name, wherever you are, his ending was a bit kind of weird. Weird in the sense that we were kind of going to somewhere, but we didn't. And I do feel that a part of that is because of that obvious choice. But for the sake of the story and the environment and the character, I think it makes sense. If anything, what even makes more sense in my brain, but I do understand why we maybe did not see it, was, Legoshi, Rui, and Haru. I mean, it was kind of obvious for me, at least. Like the perfect couple, throuple. But I'll always have fan fiction. Now, I want to say that I actually really appreciate Haru and Legoshi's relationship. It wasn't dramatic, and I actually enjoyed that. Now, before the rest of the relationship, I really want to praise that when they meet and there's this misunderstanding, I like that both parts kind of understood in a way each other and learned from it. Legoshi was like, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear enough, I misunderstood the situation. That's on me. And he never slut shamed Haru, which is, I think, very nice. I mean, it's the bottom of the barrel, but And in the case of Haru, she kind of was expecting something and kind of push it. But I think that it's nice that unless I felt that she understood that, it's not always the case. And that she even might have been a bit too extreme, so it might have made Legoshi uncomfortable. And I like that there was this honesty also later. I really enjoy an honest conversation and a relationship based on, hey, let's talk about it, even if, sometimes someone is angry or there's some sort of miscommunication. I found the baseline is so based on honesty that when they talk about it, it kind of works, and I like that. I'm not one that likes incredibly dramatic relationships, like we broke up and there's someone else arrives and oh my god. I used to really like that, but now it gets kind of annoying at a certain point because it's like, if you just talk about it, all of this could have been avoided. And final main thing that I really liked was when characters look like so basic, but I like that. I like that. That made me happy. So yeah, basically, if you want to talk about something, even heavy subjects, in a different context, maybe using fantasy or the animal kingdom, just try to think about it a bit more. Try to really understand what are you talking about and the universe you're talking about. The base of why something like The Lion King, I think, has remained is not only because of the amazing music, but also because of the way it is realistic enough that you don't have to kind of stop and be like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. You just get into it. It is a safe place enough, and at the same time, as adults, we can then get into that conversation. A bottom, very basic story and very basic characters, if you actually think about them and actually work on them, can get very complex, which may create a very nice story. I don't think that Beastars is the best manga. I don't think it is perfect. But overall, I recommend it. So if you haven't read it, go off. And whether you have read it, whether you just saw the anime, or you just don't want to read it, or maybe are you going to read it, which animal would you like to be? I think that's a nice question. Anyway, I already talked about it a lot, so bye. I would like to be a